what I liked about that song is that that's really what we're talking about. Is we're talking about the faith factor today. And when you fill up your senses with the divine, there is no room for fear. So when you fill up your senses that way, then you can just take it all in and know that it's all perfect exactly as it is and as exactly as it is not. Now the reason I say that is many of us try to control God and tell God how you want your life to live. And sometimes it's the surrendering process, knowing that God has a greater vision, a greater idea of your expression, because you are the expression of the divine. So today we're talking about the faith factor. And it was when I kept doing this, I kept thinking about the fear factor. It was a program on TV. It might still be on TV. I used to watch it when it first came out, and then I got a little bored with it after a while. But for a long time, it was really interesting because sometimes it dealt with all the fears that I have. And when I would see them, I would say, oh my gosh, that would really be scary, like walking out on a ledge or trusting walking on a wire like this with your feet and your hands holding across to the tall building. I would find that really hard to do. But what we're really talking about today is the faith, not the fear. Because what we want to remember is when you have faith, there is no room for fear. Because when you have faith, when you have that knowing, there absolutely fills up all the space. There is no room for the fear because you just know and trust, and you know that innately. You know that as just your expression of the divine. So in reading the Joyous Journal of Living, which I've been using for a series of the talks, and I'm using this month, also Living in Gratitude, one of the things that says, stop your asking. Stop your asking. And when I read that at first, I thought, gee, I wonder how these people are going to take it. These people being you. Stop your asking. Because we teach a 5-step affirmative prayer. But what we teach, and some people have a hard time grasping, is we teach the 3rd step as realization. The 1st step is God is all there is. The 2nd step is you're one with God. The 3rd step is a realization. The 4th step is Thanksgiving, which is a month of Thanksgiving. The 4th is release, let go, and let God. The 3rd step, the realization, is the hang-up. Because sometimes it turns into a petition. And by that, I mean it's a petition prayer, which is quite often a Christian type of form of prayer because you're asking some force outside of yourself to change the condition you're in. A realization step is not that. The realization step is knowing that you are already whole, perfect, and complete, and it only is the appearances which lead you to believe otherwise. And when you realize they're only appearances and not the truth of who you are, there is no reason to have a petition. Do you see that? There is a realization that's already there. And then you can look through. So stop your asking is all about stop asking, because when you're asking, you're recognizing that you are in separation, that you are not connected at that moment. And when a connection, it's all mental. It's not the truth of who you are, because you can never be separate from if God is all there is, right? I mean, it stands logic. It's only when our mind takes over and an ego says, aha, I don't want to give up control yet. So you keep on asking. And we do that. But when you receive, when you realize that you're just really wasting your time by asking. You are just wasting your time. What you can do is realize that what you want to do is recognize who you are. So when you see an event that shows up in your life, something, what you say is, I know that's not the truth of me. I know that my wholeness is my birthright. I know that what I have is really this. And what you do in the this is you imagine. Let your imagination go wild. Do not let it be restricted by that which has been of the past. But let it go. Because what you are trying to do is bring into the realization, that's called the law of attraction. You bring in that which you really desire. You don't bring into it by a help me God. I mean, I spent 50 years of my life saying, help me God. And that's the way sometimes I think prayers are. That's not a prayer. That's a cry for help because you believe that you are less than. So what I'm offering you is a chance to see that in a reverse order and know that you don't need that cry for help. All you need to do is surrender into, and surrender is not giving up. Surrender is actually surrendering your will into the divine, into that divine expression. Lewis Carroll said, you remember him who wrote Alice in the Looking Glass? Alice in Wonderland, actually, I guess. So anyway, he is quoted as saying, Alice laughed. There is no use trying, she said. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. So how many of you can believe 6 impossible things before breakfast? How many of you can believe even 6 impossible things before lunch? It's the impossibility that where we try and control God. What we try to do is say, okay, God, I know this is my existence and this is what it is, and so I want you to fix it and give me more of what I have. You realize that's a little funny, right? I mean, that's what you want is the impossibility of your own mind to imagine your own magnificence, the impossibility of your own mind to imagine what it is, your own greatness and what you can have. And when you want to think about that, think about the impossibilities and what nature gives us for examples. If you ask an aeronautical engineer if a bumblebee is constructed to fly, they would tell you it's an impossibility. The body, the wingspan cannot fly. You cannot reproduce that and get it off the ground. And yet a bumblebee does very well. It does very, very well. So it's not limited to man. They give us another example in there. He says, Roger, if you assume that you could not run a 4-minute mile up until 1954, until Roger Bannister broke a 4-minute mile, people thought it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. Today, people do it all the time. It's a ho-hum. Think about a ho-hum. Think about space travel. How many of you watched the last space shuttle takeoff? I dare say less than 10%. How many watched the first one? I dare say 100%. I mean, it's just what was impossible drew our attention. We watched. And then after a while, it's no longer impossible. It no longer comes. That is your life. That is the opportunity of your life. That which you think is impossible, if you surrender your will into the divine, it will manifest and it will no longer seem impossible to you. And it will become a ho-hum. Well, of course. Remember the of course during that I talked about a few months ago? Of course that would happen to you. I had that demonstrated again this weekend. I was showing a friend around San Diego. And I laughed because where we wanted to go to lunch, the parking space was right in front of the restaurant. Not only that, it had 55 minutes left on the meter, so I put another quarter in and I had an hour and a half of lunch. And he said, wow, that's lucky. And I said, of course. We went over to the beach because I wanted to show him the hotel, the Coronado. And I told some of you the story where I had parked on a free parking space. This time, there was a meter on the street. I stopped and parked on the meter. There was an hour and a quarter in the meter left. I only had to put another quarter in. We had 2.5 hours on the beach. It's of course living. Now I just use those because they're fun examples for me. And I believe it to be true. I always thank the universe, and I expect the next time I want to pull up, it's going to be there, and I don't get disappointed. It's like running the 4-minute mile. It's like the spacecraft. It's like the bumblebee. So it doesn't matter. It's all in our thinking and what we really want to do. Because what we forget is In God, all things are possible. In God, all things are possible. The next time you get confronted with something which just seems horrendous, which seems impossible, you don't know how, just take a moment. Your mantra ought to be, in God, all things are possible. I surrender my will. I've shown up sometimes where I want to be somewhere, and sometimes it's been to church. And I'm going to be late, I know it, and I let it go, and I'll say, I don't know that. And sometimes I show up on time, or I show up early, and I don't have a clue how it is, because I didn't break any known speed laws. And sometimes I have shown up, and everybody else was late, or started different, and so my being 5 minutes late didn't make any difference. All I'm saying is we need to relax. I say need to, I shouldn't say. I'm going to invite you to relax. Because how you live your life is really your choice. But it can be less stressful. Because that's what sometimes I think what happens to us. We get so stressed up because we want things to be different than they are. We don't like the way they appear. And that's when I refer to it, that's my 14-year-old. That's my 14-year-old mind, which shows up every once in a while. Because when I was 14, some days I wanted to be taken care of, and some days I wanted to do everything. And my poor parents never knew which I was going to be. And sometimes that's the way my ego is. Sometimes it wants to do things a certain way, and it just wants it that way. And that may not be the best for me, and it's about letting go and letting God, because all things are possible. Lily Tomlin said, when you talk to God, that's a prayer. When God talks back, it's schizophrenia. You have to remember that what you're listening to and what's going to happen. But you can use faith to terrorize your thoughts. Do you know what I mean by that? Do you remember a old TV series called, I forgot his last name all of a sudden, but anyway, it was called Dragnet. Yeah. And I remember, maybe it was even a radio show or something, because I remember doing this once in a high school, but it was like, he kept saying, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Now, why did he say that? He said that because he went to interview people at a crime, and they gave him this big story that had nothing to do with the facts. And he said, just the facts. And that's what we do. That's how we terrorize our minds. We terrorize. We make a story out of nothing. If we can remember just the facts. That's what I liked about this exercise. It was about just the facts. Because you do not have to lay down and play victim when you're in a complaint-free world. You can state what is your good without being a complaint. Because you're not putting emotion into it. You're only saying, look, this happened. This is what I would like to have happen. Or this is what, will you help me make this happen? Because you partner with somebody. That's not a complaint. That's getting your good. So don't confuse that. But what you can do is, we tend to see something happening to us, and we suddenly imagine the worst possible thing that happens. Usually this is around illness and health. I think, many of us in religious science say that death is just another expression of our beingness. There we go on. Yet many people are terrified of death. Even the best practitioners sometimes are terrified of death because it's an unknown. They don't really know what's going to happen to them. And many of us are just not comfortable with that. But if we can settle into it, just know that it's all perfect, it's all God, no matter what is happening, whether there is appearances of an illness, whether it's cold or whether it's cancer, that it is God's blessing at work right then and there. It is God's grace. That there is a way through all of this. That way may be death. It may not. But If you truly believe that God is all there is and God is the very highest, then that is all good. That is some of the toughest stuff to get our mind wrapped around. And that's the ultimate fear, I think. I mean, one of the examples they give in here is about fear of speaking, and I think, since I do this every Sunday, it's fear of speaking, but some people are absolutely terrified. Apparently that is, if you take a survey, that's the number one fear. I personally think in the work I do, death is the number one fear. I just think people are frightened of it because they're not at peace with themselves. They're not at peace with what's going on. They don't trust in what's happening and how it's going to unfold. So whether it's public speaking, which is the number one, whether it's illness, whether it's friendship. You know, some people don't like to go to parties because they don't know how to fit in. Some people don't like to go to a new environment because, particularly a job. Jobs are some of the most terrifying fear things. Filling out an application, submitting it to somebody, and then listening to it, because what we do is we hear it as a rejection when they say no. It's not a rejection. It's an opportunity for somebody else to say yes. When somebody says no to you for whether a relationship or a job, it's not no to you. It's an opportunity for yes, for that perfect next thing that is happening to show up in your life. And that is another trusting in God. Through God, in God, all things are possible. So it's about getting rid of the fear factor and inviting in the faith factor. It's about trusting. It's about having faith. It's about just knowing that it's all good. So one of the reflection comments in here, I really liked it, so I wanted to share it with you. It says, don't get caught in frightening images that the media or others want you to have. I know sometimes when people talk, some of people watch the news. I mean, I watch the news too. I don't watch it as often as I used to because right now I just feel there's such a heavy slant towards certain things, and I just am not that interested in hearing the same stuff over again. If you like that, that's fine. But where I went with this about that is sometimes you tell people something about that's going on in your life, and their immediate response is, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Because what they're doing is seeing the negativity about you. Not about you, but about your events. And you may not see it that way at all. And sometimes it's really hard to stay positive and say, it's okay, I know it's going to work out. This is just a phase. This is just a transition that I'm moving through. This is on my way to something bigger and better expression of who I truly am, who I came here to be. This is just a phase. It's kind of like the caterpillar going to be the butterfly. It actually has to not only consume its body, it has to consume its head. If it doesn't consume its head, it can't get there. Why do you think that is? If it was a human head, that's because that mind is what keeps you from being the butterfly. So you'll have to swallow it up and take it in and digest it and get rid of it. So that's the opportunity for you to step through whatever fear is when you know that that's what it's all about. I like what they said. Fear is the faith that one will lose one's job or home or love. And so often fear is completely out of proportion with reality. You know, there's a, is that true? And I wanted to say Katie, all of a sudden, like, shit. Byron Katie. Thank you. Man, I'm having a mind problem. It must be November 2nd. Or it's the hour change. Byron Katie is that's true. Because what she really gets you, she asks you 4 questions when you come up with any insurmountable thing. And then those 4 questions, what she really does is she says, is that true? Do you know it absolutely is true? Because if you say yes on the first one, you usually have to say, well, I'm not so sure on the second. Because absolutely puts a different qualifier on it. And then she asks you, well, what happens if you turn it around? and made it the opposite. And by the time you get to the fourth question, what you realize is you don't know whether it's true or not. You've just really made up the answer. Because in most of us, we don't really know. We don't really know what's going to happen next. We just make up a story. So the invitation is you can make up the story about faith as the next step, or you can make up the story about fear as the next step. So it's a fear factor versus the faith factor. And you can decide which you want to go, how that really works for you. And so what they say is, where are you letting your worry about experiencing something you don't want to have happen keep you stuck and moving forward? Because sometimes when we are afraid of what might happen, we do nothing. We're like paralyzed with fear. Deer in the headlights. Deer in the headlights get hit. They make big dents in cars. So you can either be a deer in the headlights or you can move forward. You can know that it's just only a temporary situation and it's not the truth of who you are. Corrie ten Boom, who I do not know who that is, but I like what she said, faith is the radar that sees through the fog. Faith is the radar that sees through the fog. I love that. I love that saying. And William Newton Clark said, faith is the daring of the soul to go further than it can see. The daring of the soul to go further than it can see. That is true faith. That's really operating in that faith principle. So whatever is happening, I encourage you to approach it with trust and with confidence. And faith is the willingness to move forward with allowing your doubt and fear to get in the way. Faith is the ability to move forward towards the what without needing to know the how. That stumbles a lot of us up. If you can move forward without having to know how, let God take care of the how. You wouldn't be asking the question if you already knew how. So let God take care of that. And then faith is a powerful, positive expectation of the things will actually work out somehow. So if your faith is a little shaky, remember what you are having faith in. Do you have faith in the negativity will occur? Or do you have faith in the positive will occur? What are you having faith in? So what is calling you into a deeper walk in faith and trust today? And how can you confidently act more on your faith? Thank you.